Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Broad Reach podcast. Welcome back, and if it's your first time coming here, welcome. This is our podcast. It's mostly about sailing and things beyond, and we have been covering the Golden Globe race, especially. We're massive fans of the Golden Globe race, so if you want to go back to our first 2 episodes, we can give you an introduction to that. But this is episode 3, and welcome back. And I think we're going to go straight into the tracker. Sean, if you want to get that up on your screen.
Yeah, so I'm just going to share that now. 1 second. So let me know, Shane, when this comes through.
Yeah, that's up there now.
Yeah, so all right, let's just give a quick update. So for people who are joining us new from all around the world, different parts of the world, I'll just explain what this is. So we're following this race, this solo circumnavigation race, and this is a real-time or very close to real-time view of where all of the different competitors are. So I'm just going to quickly go through where everybody is, which part of the world they are. They all started in France, the west coast of France, made their way down the South Atlantic to Cape Town, and then onwards towards Australia. So you can see at the back of the fleet at the moment, we have Guy Waits. Now, he would, under normal circumstances, be due to call in at Hobart, do a media stop there, do interviews, hand over his footage of the leg that he did from Cape Town to Hobart, and have a chat with the organisers and just do some media interviews. But he has already stopped in Cape Town, and he's not going to make it to Hobart in time, which would allow him actually to complete the race essentially in time. So he's going to be out of the race, but we're tracking him until he gets to Hobart at least. Now, the latest news, I think, Shane, that I've got at least from today was that he's going to continue on and abandon the Hobart stop and actually just sail back to France. So he's going to complete his navigation. It'll be a solo circumnavigation, unassisted, but with one stop.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So what that means for the race organizers is that when he actually passes Hobart, because he's out of the race, we're no longer going to be officially tracking him. And that's for safety reasons, because he's not officially part of the race. Any rescues and everything else would have to be coordinated separately, not as part of the race. So it's to do with insurance and everything else. If he's not in the race, he can't be part of this whole tracking system. That's just a piece of new information.
But he can set himself up on YB Tracker.
Yes.
His own race.
Anyone that wants to follow Guy can still follow him on his own tracker, which he will use. So it'll be similar to this, but it'll be an individual one from his website, and we will share that once we have those details. So I'll just continue on and give you a quick update. So he's doing 5.6 knots, and he's that's some pretty decent wind. That's like 40, 50 knots of wind, probably gusting up to 60, but it's ahead of him. And if we move the weather forward here using this functionality, we can see that, he's not going to have any problem there. So that's weather system, that low pressure system is moving faster than he is. So it won't be an issue for him. And you can see that the lighter shade green color wind and orange color wind is 20 to 30 knots, and that should be absolutely fine. Really good conditions for sailing. The reason we know it's a low pressure is because in this case it's clockwise and it's the southern hemisphere. So we'll talk through that as we come along. Ian Herbert Jones is the next guy we're going to look at, moving at 5 knots, really good, decent speed. What has he got in terms of weather? Let's just come back here a small bit. That is a nasty enough looking system here. And the reason for that is because you've got northerlies here, and in a very short space of time, it's changing to southwesterly. So the kind of sea that will kick up can be quite difficult. So if we look at the waves here, in this case, you can see, you can actually see the different churning of the sea. So you've got like up to 9 meters of sea in here, and then you've got much like, seas that are not quite as big, and that kind of rapid change of the wind can cause very, very dangerous conditions for sailors. So that is one to watch.
Wow,
Um,
that's pretty rough going for him.
I think if we look at this, Shane, I think he might just escape it. If we move this weather forward, I think he's going to be okay. Yeah.
Oh, he's just on the edge of it there, yeah.
I think he's going to be okay. I mean, that's assuming that this weather is accurate. Of course, it can be slightly off, but I think in that case, we can probably assume that he's going to be okay. Jeremy, 4.5 knots, doing pretty good. Gug, as we move towards the front of the fleet, doing 6 knots. He's flying. Kirsten is doing 3.2. She'll be frustrated. Abalash is flying at 7, and Simon out in front is doing 6.8 knots. He's absolutely
he's past the exclusion zone now, so he's all Simon has left now is to round Cape Horn and go to port, which is amazing. He's essentially free now of all the he doesn't need to worry about the exclusion zones. Actually, I listened to a call with Simon during the week, and what's interesting is he did loads of sight readings with a sextant, trying to figure out was he past the exclusion zone before he turned. So it's kind of amazing to think about. He's in the middle of the ocean, and we see this line, but of course he can't. There's no defining points for him. So I think he took like 5 or 6 readings before he decided, yeah, I'm just going to go for it.
Wow. So what Shane is actually talking about here is this exclusion zone, this orange no-go zone. There's 2 reasons for it. Number one, there's a lot more wind in that kind of section of the ocean. Also, it's more distant. So if there needs to be a rescue, it's very, very difficult to coordinate. There aren't really shipping lanes in that part of the Southern Ocean. So that's the reason. And what this is Simon's track here. See that red track, the thin red track? That's Simon's track. And look how close he was to cutting the corner.
Yeah.
If he had cut that corner for every hour that he'd be in there, he'd be penalized 3 hours. So it can have a significant impact at the end of the race and could cost you a place. So that's really interesting. Jean-Luc is just there as a reference to the 2018 race. So basically what Shane has just said is the last kind of the last milestone really for Simon is rounding Cape Horn, which is infamous in itself. Coming back up the South Atlantic, they've already gone down the South Atlantic and went to Cape Town over here. This is the original track, the outward track, and this is the return track here on the left, this red one. So they'll come up the coast of Brazil, back up to France. I think that's pretty much it for the tracker, Shane, for this week. Anything else there you want to go through?
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, that's everybody updated.
We came across another website recently, the GGR Underground. Do you want to maybe just give a kind of an overview and take us through that?
Yeah, it's a great website that's it's full of statistics about the Golden Globe race. Just tell me when you can see that there.
Yeah, I can see it.
Brilliant. So this is a website. It's ggr.underground.co.za, and the GGR team highlighted this in their social media. And basically, it's made by a guy called Jonathan Endersby, and he lives in Cape Town. And I think he's just a big fan of the race, and he likes kind of making new software systems and stuff like that. So he just made it for fun, and it's brilliant. Like you can see here, the race leader Simon, he sailed 17,837 nautical miles, 64% of the route, which is incredible. What a distance! So if we scroll down here, there's some really interesting stats. You can see these are the details of all the skippers who've retired. There's Pat Lawless, the Irishman. You can see his Aries self-steering broke 5 days out of Cape Town. Just some brilliant information all captured here. And there's some really nice speed logs here as well.
So Shane, what is this like? What is the green? What is the orange? What is the red? What is going on here? If I'm looking at this and I'm new to this race, what does this tell us? Is green good? Red bad?
Yeah, green is great. I mean, these are 4-hour intervals and average knot speeds, so you can see where wind has dropped, and they're making good. They're making good with the wind, so you can see Simon's average speeds are extremely consistent. Like, that's definitely, Simon is adept at managing his way out of different pressure zones and working his sails to the maximum potential. So you can see there, it's just incredible how consistent he is. These are the 7-day logs. There's also ETAs for the skippers. And if we go down further, there are some records as well. And I think the best 7-day distance is held by Abalash, 1,165 nautical miles. But we would definitely recommend. Sorry, Sean.
What does that mean? The best 7-day distance? What, like?
So that's the best average distance over 7 days. So the amount of nautical miles. So Abalash is quite consistent as well as Simon. Abalash is coming in second overall. So we would highly recommend people, fans of the race, come and have a look at this website. It's excellent. There's some great stuff there. So Guy Waits actually did some massive speeds.
If you scroll up there, Shane, to the 7-day log, you can actually, it's one thing that stood out. If you scroll up to the kind of green and red, the next one up,
yeah,
you can actually really see it. Like, look at Guy.
Yeah.
Now, we know Guy's unfortunately out of the race. The question I think we could ask is, if he didn't have barnacles on his boat and didn't have to stop at Cape Town and clean off the boat, where would he be? And it
that's
looks
a great question.
Yeah, it looks like he'd be maybe in the top 4 because he is absolutely bombing it.
Yeah. I think he really wanted to show his prowess. You know, he knew he wasn't going to make it to Hobart, but he wanted to show the world that he's obviously an extremely good sailor. Such a shame with the barnacles, but you know, we covered that in the previous episode. We talked a bit about the barnacles, and yeah. Anyway, we would highly recommend people come and have a look at this website. So I think you were going to share something, Sean, next to do with
1 second.
To do with Dublin.
Well, just let me share the tracker first of all. I just want to put it in context for people. So, can you see that, Shane?
Yeah.
So over here, and this is, I mentioned Captain Bligh last week. The reason I mentioned him is because I think it's Bligh Bay is in Tasmania. Don mentioned it on one of the tracker updates. We've also got the Bounty Islands, and like, people have probably heard the story of Mutiny on the Bounty and William Bligh, who was the skipper of that boat. He essentially, 1789, he was turfed off the boat, set adrift by the mutineers, and he then endeavored to, on one of the most incredible voyages in sailing history. It's famous. The actual, you know, aside from the mutiny itself, which is infamous, has story of survival and what he actually did by sailing about 3,600 nautical miles from Tonga to East Timor is just absolutely incredible. And then when he completed that voyage, he actually returned to the UK, and then he ended up in Dublin, of all places. So he was, not only was he an unbelievably skilled navigator, but he was a really good draftsman and map maker. So he was brought to Dublin to survey Dublin Bay, and I actually have found the map that he created. So I'm just going to share it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So, and then
So he was a craftsman. Like, did he produce maps of different regions in the world, or was it just?
Yeah, he's done other places. In addition to that, and I'm just going to show. Oh, this is his route. So that's his. So this is the route of the actual boat, the Bounty, hence the Bounty Islands, and it went. You see the way it came through the southern tip of New Zealand, Shane.
Yeah.
That's where the Bounty Islands actually are, and they're one of the waypoints on the actual GGR. So they sailed up around here. Yeah, they sailed up around here, and I think maybe you've got one or two stories about what went on up here. But we'll get to that in a minute. I think we're past the watershed, are we, at 9:00? This is where the mutiny happened at Tonga, and this green arrow is his voyage from Tonga to, and like this is with very minimal equipment, some crew, a small crew, very minimal supplies, and it's an incredible story of survival. And there have been documentaries and dramatizations, and there's actually been a couple of reconstructions or people who've attempted to redo the feat.
There's been, you know, for anyone who's not familiar with the story, there's been very famous movies made about it. You know, one had Marlon Brando as Captain Bligh, and there was another one where Anthony Hopkins was Captain Bligh at a later point. But a bit of trivia about the Marlon Brando. Apparently, he was a disaster during the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty. But if anyone wants to look into that, there's a lot of stories in that. But what's amazing, I think, about the Mutiny on the Bounty is the guys who they were led by Fletcher Christensen, who was he was played by, in the Anthony Hopkins movie, Mel Gibson plays him. But apparently he was this handsome guy, and he was kind of leading the mutiny. But they all ended up some of them ended up in Tahiti, and some of them ended up on Pitcairn Island. And the inhabitants on that island today are descendants of the guys from the Bounty, which is crazy.
Yeah,
mad.
Absolutely mad story. So this is his map.
Wow.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
So this has got to be just about familiar to most Irish people, but I'll actually explain. So this is Dublin City. So this is the River Liffey. Quite like in the top left, quite clearly visible and similar. This is Clontarf here on the north side, where you see the North Bull. So just north of the North Bull is Clontarf. What is the North Bull? The North Bull is an infamous sandbank in Dublin. The South Bull is another infamous sandbank in Dublin, and there's many shipwrecks in between these sandbanks. And the sandbanks, of course, shifted with tides, currents, etc. This is Howth, the very famous peninsula of Howth. You now have the Bailey Lighthouse down here. Actually, it's actually there. I can see it, Bailey. So he's included the Bailey Lighthouse. So he came to Dublin, surveyed this, and his job was to solve this problem of the sand. So what he actually suggested was, you see this thin line here on the north side of the river. Can you see that extending out, Shane?
Yeah.
That thin line. He proposed that wall would be built, and that would essentially keep the river. The river would flow through. The south wall was already there. The river would flow through the north wall, south wall, and clear out the sand and allow for boats to come in and out of Dublin. So he designed it. This was before the actual design. Now, they didn't actually go exactly with Bligh's plan. They decided on a wall from Clontarf, but I actually can show you exactly how that looks now. And this is, I'm going to show you modern day Dublin.
That's incredible. I had no idea that he designed that.
Yeah. So this is what he came up. This is the effect of what actually happened. So if you look, this is where the wall is here.
Yeah.
If I just zoom in, so Bligh had suggested doing the wall directly out from the port here. They went with a slightly different design. but the same idea, same concept. And he predicted that this island, which is Bull Island, obviously named after the North Bull. That's something new that I learned in the last week. He predicted that that island would form, and you have the very now famous Dollymount Strand and golf course, which naturally occurred as a result of a man-made wall, if that makes sense.
Wow.
But Bligh predicted that would actually happen, and it's really an incredible and important part of Dublin shipping and sailing. And he also suggested that they build a port down here, and that of course that port in that style, in that design, became Dunleary. So just a little bit of trivia for our Irish listeners, and an interesting connection of the Bounty Islands, mutiny on the Bounty, all the way back to Dublin.
Wow, what a connection.
So we've been following Simon, and there's something that I think, Shane, there's a part of the world that Simon was close to, and maybe you just want to talk a little bit about that. Simon being the race leader.
Yeah, so like Sean just showed there on the tracker, Simon coming to the edge of the exclusion zone and heading down. And what's amazing is Simon passed a point in the South Pacific there that's actually called Point Nemo, and he was 3 degrees north of it. So it's and basically Point Nemo it's like the furthest point from any land in the ocean. So it's the furthest away point from land in the ocean, and it's as far as you can get. And it's a point of inaccessibility, it's called. So in the world, you've got various poles of inaccessibility. So that would be an oceanic pole of inaccessibility. And they say that it's so far away from land that at times, if the International Space Station is to go around the Earth, that sometimes the people on the space station are closer to Point Nemo than anyone else on land, which is incredible. But Simon did a call, for anyone who doesn't know, the Golden Globe Race team do satellite calls to all the skippers. They're really, really enjoyable. And Simon was asking, he was really curious about Point Nemo, and he was like, was I near it? And Sebastian and the GGR team was saying to him, you're only 3 degrees from it. And it was very exciting. But one other fact about Point Nemo is that sometimes if they're dumping stuff from space, they aim for that point. So you actually, if you're anywhere near it, you need to be careful because something might come at you from space. But definitely recommend people look that up. It's a curious one. I love facts like that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know, was it Simon himself or someone in race control recommended that he put on his helmet for that particular stretch?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, his crash helmet. So basically, Shane, like that point, like if I'm hearing you correctly, is the most, like Simon is the most isolated person on planet Earth right now. Is that basically what we're saying?
Well, a couple of days ago,
civilization.
A couple of days ago, he would have been the furthest from, like, he would have been the most isolated person in the ocean, for sure. So it's interesting. Like it is interesting when you talk about these skippers on their own doing these solo voyages. You know, the isolation is immense, really. It goes back to that mental fortitude that we talked about. You know, if you start thinking about that too much, you know, it's incredible, this feat that they're taking on.
Yeah, like that actually leads us on to a nicely into the next point, Shane, because we're going to do something a little different next week, and I think we're going to delve into that isolation and the challenges and the mental toughness that's involved in the race. And maybe you're going to tell us and whet our appetites a little bit as to what's to come.
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. We're going to talk about the psychology of the skippers, but we do have a big announcement about next week, and we actually have a skipper from the GGR who we're going to interview. So it's big news, and it's going to be our first interview for the Broad Reach podcast. And we're not going to tell you who it is yet because it's a secret, but we're very excited. For sure. But yeah, that's big news. Really Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, look, it's fantastic, and look, we're really excited about it, and we can't wait to bring that to everybody next week. Just before we wrap up, Shane, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about. So, like we talked about last week and the week before, that the skippers can't get any help from anybody. So, like one question that we've been asked by a couple of different people is, like, what do they do for water? Like, do they have a water maker on board? Our understanding is they don't. They can't. It's not technology from 1968. So what do they do? How do they do it? What's the solution to that?
Yeah, so they have to account to bring hundreds of liters of water, and they will run out. That's the thing. Unless, I know Pat Lawless's boat it was a little bit bigger than some of the fleet, and he was able to bring a little bit more, but basically a lot of them bring around 250 liters of water or 300, and then what they have to do is collect rainwater in the middle of the ocean and feed it into tanks and basically gather their own fresh water to drink, which is amazing. So I know with your experience in sailing, Sean, you need to be really, really frugal. Like, you need to be ration. The water is a massive thing for long distance sailing. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
like it's like it's precious. It's blue gold. Some people call it. It's like, it's really, really difficult. And like the longest trip I've done is 16 days. But even on that trip, we really, really were careful with water. And it's like, there's no showers on board. There are showers, or there are ways to wash, but nobody takes showers on board, which may seem a bit grim. So these guys the only time they will possibly wash themselves is if there's a flat cam and they can actually dip themselves in seawater, but they will not be using fresh water to wash themselves unless it's raining. It's actually raining. Maybe they'll have a quick wash. But water is absolutely precious. Some of the food is freeze dried, which you need to add water to it. And of course, you need fluid to survive. So if you're starting off with 240 liters, that's got to last you 8 months around the world. And you got to catch. You got to catch whatever extra water you need, and if it doesn't rain, you've got problems. So it's a massive thing, and it is so precious.
Wow!
And you can be certain you won't need to warn the skippers to not leave the tap running when they're brushing their teeth, like we need to warn ourselves, Shane.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
it's amazing to think.
Yeah. Look, I think we'll leave it there for this week, and we'll, as we said, we're excited about next week. We've got a really special guest, and we're going to get the heads down now and get really prepared for that. And we'll catch everybody else next Wednesday.
Yeah, it's going to be a big episode for us. So hopefully we can get everybody in. Thanks very much for watching, everybody.
Cheers, folks.